Good morning. I am driving around in Sarah's RAV4 Prime trying to kill the battery. And one might ask why I'm doing that, and you would be perfectly valid in asking that question. Could be that I have too much time on my hands. I'm looking for something to kill it. But I've had this ongoing question about this car. We've had this car for a little over 3 years now. We bought it in October of 2021. It's now January of 2025. And we've driven this car kind of two types of driving. So if you were to count the number of trips we've taken in this car, and then do a percentage, about 95% of the trips we've taken in this car have been around town in electric mode. We keep it at home plugged in, and we drive around, and it's less than 10 miles, maybe a lot of them less than 5 miles, just because we live in a small town. And we drive around in electric mode, we come back, we plug in. Drive around electric mode, we come back, we plug in. Then on the flip side, probably 3% of those trips are, maybe 3 to 4%, are trips of over 200 miles. So we've got to go to Seattle, Portland, Boise, Spokane. We live in a place that's equally inaccessible from everywhere. This car has the ability to charge the battery while you're driving. You can put it in a mode where it not only drives using the ICE motor, it charges the battery system up to 80% of capacity. And so that's, let's say 38 miles of range, something like that. Realistically, once again on the freeway, that comes down to under 30 miles of range. So when we're driving to Seattle, the first 30 miles, we go in electric, and then it switches over to hybrid mode. And the question is, if we put it in charge mode and drive, and let's say it takes 40 miles to charge the battery, or even 50 miles to charge the battery back up, and then you can drive in EV mode for 30 miles again, is your efficiency over that 70 miles better than it would have been had you just been in EV mode the whole time? And so I don't know the answer to that, and I looked up online to various YouTube videos and forums. So the only test of the charging that I found online was a YouTube guy who lives in upstate New York who has a RAV4 Prime. So what this guy did was he took his RAV4 Prime, he ran the battery down so it would only drive in hybrid mode. He then filled up the gas tank to completely full, parked the car outside his house, and put it in charge mode, and left it sitting there idling in charge mode outside of his house. And it took like 3 hours and 36 minutes for it to charge the battery to 80%, which is the most it will charge it to. He then drove it back to the gas station, topped up his gas tank, and found that it took, I wrote it down here, 1.791 gallons of gas, which is what he burned in charging the battery to 80%. Now, then he looked at the range that it said, which I think was like 38 miles, and he divided 38 by 1.791, and he got 21.21 miles per gallon. So he said the efficiency of putting the vehicle in charge mode, you get 21 miles per gallon. But that's not the question I'm asking. The question I'm asking is, if you're driving at 70 miles an hour and you're in charge mode, and you charge the battery to this 80%, and then you switch to electric mode and you drive, say you get 30 or slightly under 30 miles of range in electric mode, and then you use that electric mode and then you switch back to charge mode, is the efficiency of driving in that way greater or less, and what's the margin, than just driving in hybrid mode? So that's the test I'm going to do today. All right, so I have just filled up. Interestingly, on that tank of gas, so I had not filled up. Let me just say it had been longer than I realized. I did put gas stabilizer in that tank before the last time I filled up. But we got over 100 miles per gallon on that last tank because we've been driving mostly electric. So I am now going to get on the freeway here. And what my plan is to get on the freeway, set the cruise control at 70 miles an hour, and just keep going. All right, I'm going to put it in charge mode. We are in charge mode. We're going behind a hay truck here, so I got to get out and get past him to go 70. One of the other things I actually wanted to mention is that I watched a video of another guy, I think he's called Car Care Nut, and he's a former Toyota technician that now has his own garage, and he does these really in-depth discussions of Toyota vehicles. And he actually talked about this issue of charging while you're on the freeway, and he recommended that if you're coming into, if you're driving a long distance and you're in hybrid mode and you've burned through all your battery, that you charge before you get into town. You put it in charge mode the last, say, 30 miles, and then you've got a battery, a larger battery capacity. You can then use that around town. So that, once again, I'm just going to test that. Well, I am approaching 30 miles into this trip, and a couple problems. First of all, only added 4 miles of range so far. I may hit 5 miles of range at 30 miles. I'm at 27 miles right now that I've been traveling on the freeway. So the stuff that the videos I watched, the stuff that I read seemed to indicate I should expect charging to happen faster than it has been happening. Somebody said between 1 and 2 miles driven per mile of additional electric range, which in retrospect I should have thought about that a little more critically. So, the best laid plans, I'm not going to charge to the full amount on this and then replicate that. I just don't have the time today. The other problem I ran into is that going 70 miles an hour, everybody's going 70 or around 70. So I end up with the adaptive cruise control, speeding up, slowing down, which creates more variability in the driving conditions. And so I sped up at a certain point, which I logged. I sped up to 75 miles an hour. And that just actually gets me going slightly faster than much of the traffic, so I don't end up stuck with other cars going the same speed and having the car, and I can't get past them and can't get away from them. So we'll see how that works. All right, well, I am currently, we've gone 43 miles and only 6 miles of charging. I'm going to turn around and head back. and I will continue to charge. So I'm going to leave it in charge mode here. I'm about to hit an interchange where I can turn around. And I will let you know exactly how far I've come before we turn around and go back. It's been 44 miles now, so I suspect it will be 45 miles. And I'm going to leave it in charge mode. Actually, I just hit 7 miles of range. So we currently have 23 miles to get back to the gas station. I have accrued 13 miles of electric range. So probably in about 5 miles here, I'm going to switch to electric mode. I'm now at 16 miles, 15 miles of range. I'm going to switch to EV right now because I want to make sure that I use all the juice. And there's a big hill I have to go down, so just to be sure. So I have now switched to EV with 16 miles left. So that means I drove 74 miles in charge mode. Yeah, so I drove in electric for 11 miles, even though it said the estimated range was 15, which is about what I expect. It's, you get about 2/3 of the estimated range on the freeway. That's been my experience. But so I think that was pretty successful. I'm pretty happy that I got 11 miles of electric range. That's not insignificant over 90 miles. That's more than 10%. So in theory, if when charging, the numbers aren't going to be exactly right, but when charging in charge mode, if there's not an additional 10% cost in fuel usage, I should have made that up. Now, the question is whether or not the margin of error with the different driving conditions and the filling the gas is going to make a significant if we're going to see any difference at all. In some ways, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw no difference. So I will fill up and then I will video again before I start my next loop. So I got 2.994 gallons of gas to give me efficiency of 30 miles per gallon, which is not great. So I have a feeling we're gonna now just drive in hybrid, do the same loop, and have a feeling it's gonna be, I don't know, could be a little more efficient than that. I'm getting back on the freeway again, and I will speed up to 70 miles an hour, and at milepost 196 I need to change my speed to 75 in order to keep the conditions the same. A little bit of additional information. I mentioned the weather conditions are pretty still. There's not a lot of wind. The temperatures have ranged from 39 degrees Fahrenheit, which it is here right now. Actually, it was the lowest I saw was 37 degrees Fahrenheit, kind of at the high elevation point of the drive, and then the high temperature was 43 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm about to speed up to 75 miles an hour because I'm about to hit milepost 196 where I did so on the last loop. So I'm coming up on my turnaround spot here. The driving conditions are exactly the same as they were. It's 43 degrees here. Looking at the fuel gauge, it appears that I have burned less fuel on the first half of this loop. But of course, the proof is in the pudding. The fuel gauge is not particularly reliable. All right, I am 3 miles out, I guess 3 miles out from the gas station. An uneventful drive. Honestly, the fuel gauge looks to be in a very similar place that it was on the last trip. So I have driven basically 180 miles testing, plus probably an extra 20 to 30 miles this morning to run the battery down when I got started, and then it'll be another 7 miles home. So I will essentially have gone 210 to 220 miles in this effort, and then I'm gonna have to go home and cut together the video. You wonder why I'm involved in all this and what I'm doing. You know, I do feel like, having done both loops, the conditions, the weather conditions, the driving conditions are almost exactly the same. So I feel like I did a good job controlling for that. It's not if there's, you know, some confounding variable that's gonna mess up the results. I think I've controlled what I could control to the best of my ability, and it's worked out pretty well. I can go right back to the stall that I want to go into. I am so excited. That pretty much makes my day. So I will fill up the tank, run the numbers, and come back and talk to you about that. I have crunched a few numbers. I'm going to drive back home and tell you what the results are. I honestly, this is not what I expected. I expected to see a decrease in efficiency from running the charge mode and the electric. However, that is not what I got. So here's what I did. I drove 90 miles twice, the exact same route. The first time I drove 74 miles in charge mode, 11 miles in electric mode, and then the last 5 miles in hybrid mode. And when I filled the tank, it took 2.994 gallons of fuel for a efficiency of 30.6 miles per gallon. So then I jumped right back on the freeway and I drove the exact same distance, just in hybrid mode. Came back, filled up, and it took 3.117 gallons of gas for an efficiency of 28.87 miles per gallon. So I've had a little time to think about, you know, my initial excitement about the results of this. It's the next day. I've looked at the numbers. I put them in a spreadsheet, which I'm going to kind of set up here. And the first thing is that charging was slower than I expected. It was essentially close to 7 miles driving at 75 miles an hour in order to get 1 mile of EV range. That's measured range, not estimated range. So if you remember, it estimated 15 miles. I only measured 11. This may in fact be a function of time rather than distance traveled. Actually, it probably is, almost certainly is. So it could just be that it takes that amount of time for the batteries to absorb the energy with the charging system that's built into the car. I don't know. Somebody who has more expertise than me would know that. The second thing was, and this is obviously the most important thing, is that the differences that we're talking about here are pretty marginal. We're talking about like a tenth, a little bit more than a tenth of gallon of gas difference between the two loops. And that's a margin of error where the pump, it could be a problem with the pump, could be a measurement there. It's close though. So I'm cautiously optimistic that it could make a difference. With all that in mind, the one other thing that I did want to do was kind of estimate the difference in how much the efficiency of the vehicle in hybrid mode is reduced when you go into charging mode. And I can do that estimate here by looking at the average fuel consumption when I did the loop just in hybrid mode, applying that to the 5 miles that I drove the vehicle in hybrid mode during the loop, subtracting out that amount of gas that I would have burned, and then estimating the efficiency based on the gas that remained for the 74 miles that I drove in charge mode. That's not too confusing. And that came out to 26.23 miles per gallon, which was a decrease of about 9% in efficiency between hybrid mode and charging mode. So, I don't know. I enjoy doing this kind of thing. It's kind of silly, but I have more information now, and the next time we take a long trip, I'm gonna test this out more. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.